All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our discussion, our ideas forum for April. Tonight, we're going to be talking about about teenagers. We're going to be talking about with Chris Wolak and Susan Fuhr. Uh, Wolak is in his 30th year as a Waubonsie Valley High School social studies and government teacher. Fuhr also teaches social studies and government, as well as AP European history at Matea Valley. They will both draw on their experiences to discuss students' perspectives on government and their expectations of post-high school voter participation. Wolak also founded the Youth and Government Club at Waubonsie Valley High School and formerly worked as a print journalist covering local politics for the Naperville Sun. At Matea Valley, Fuhrer is the judicial advisor for youth and government and the faculty founder of the Citizens of Matea Club. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to operate a bunch of things at once here. The two District 204 teachers have collaborated on civics education initiatives for years in partnership with the League of Women Voters Naperville and other organizations with a teaching belief that democracy is a verb. Highlights include registering thousands of students to vote and taking two 45-student groups to witness and work at the Iowa caucuses in 2016 and 2020. Chris and Sue, thank you both for joining us tonight to share your knowledge and experiences. For everybody attending, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. All right, I'm going to pass it on to you, Chris and Sue.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Julie. First of all, I'm going to share my screen. I've got a slide deck that I hope works for everyone to be able to see. So hopefully, can you all see that? I'm hoping. How are we doing with that? I don't know. Did that work?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let's see. It worked before.
You want to do you want share it with me and I'll try too, just by an off chance.
Can I? Let's see. Great. Oh, there it is. What was there, right? I'm gonna.
This is giving me PTSD from when we were on Zoom.
I know, and we were working on this here, and then that was the thing. So now, no.
I'm gonna try here.
Julie, did you make Sue a co?
Yeah, I think I have it right.
Okay.
I did. There we go.
There it goes. See, Susan, you are. In fact, I was almost gonna tell my friend Sue when we were doing this. Can you make the slide deck, because her slide decks look so much better than mine. But anyway, I didn't want to burden her with that. But our talk today, as titled "How Area Teens View Our Government," is gonna. I think a lot of our focus is how do we try to get teens to have a vested interest in their government, and the fact. For years, I've always told my students, like from a line from the movie Dave, and Kevin Kline's character is his friend comes in the Oval Office and he says, "You can get in so much trouble from who?" Dave says, "From the government," and he says, "I'm the government." And so I kind of very nerdily would always mention that to my students. But I think Sue and I, as long as we've been teaching and collaborating together, really view the mikveh adage that democracy is a verb. And when the kids are out doing civic actions, then they become more involved in their government, and take a vested interest. And I think in District 204, and especially I must say at Waubonsie Valley and Matea Valley, we really kind of live that with our civic teaching. And just on these first couple of slides, there are several pictures, and these might not be the students that are all of our government students, but if on this first slide, there's a soapbox that's become a senior soapbox in my classroom, and students from one of our trips to the Iowa caucuses are all posing with that. The soapbox is kind of a cool thing because that is a activity that we have where students pick their own issue to advocate for, and they research it, and then they speechify on it with a call to action. So already they're starting then, how can one person in this constitutional democracy of we the people make a difference. On the bottom left, this is one of my students from Waubonsie Valley, but it was at Matea Valley this spring, where upset Aurora mayoral candidate winner John Leish was meeting with one of my students, and he was asking him some good questions. The forums that Matea Valley has continued after we had started at Waubonsie Valley back years ago have brought regular and AP students and civic leaders, like you see Bill Foster to the right there, to come out and actually meet with the students. And I think Sue can maybe expound on it later. They hosted 2 forums this election year. We probably had, I don't know, what do you think, Sue, between the
I
2
know.
forums?
Yeah, between the 2 forums, we probably had over 400 students attend. I know
Yeah.
that we were upwards of a little over 200. I think we actually had more for the local election, than we did actually in the fall. So
Yeah.
we've had just outstanding turnouts for both.
Yeah, the spring with the local election, and you see Leish there, that was the only time at all at that time, before the Aurora primary, that all of the mayoral candidates were at one sitting. And in fact, that is even more pronounced because just 2 weeks before the general election, my alderman here in the 8th ward in Aurora uh, asked me to moderate a forum in which 15 students of mine came. But candidate Leish backed out of that because he thought that it was going to be propping up the mayor. Well, the kids showed up, and they were like, and the incumbent Mayor Irvin was there, but um, Sue's kids from Citizens of Matea, their forum was the only one to get all of the candidates out. And then you just see some other photos. I don't know what the actually, unfortunately, the black screen is covering one of my favorite pictures that Sue had sent from one of the things that Citizens of Matea just recently did. I don't know what that big block is covering that great picture that you guys have, but
Yeah, so
um,
I
oh,
yeah,
there,
I
oh,
was just
there
gonna
it is.
say,
Okay,
yeah, I moved, yeah, depending on where you're looking, like the far right,
okay.
Citizens of Matea, I don't know, is basically it's a bipartisan club, and we've started during COVID, and it was really just a kind of way, what can we do some civic action online? And then it's kind of has grown and kind of continued from there. But they're so energized about getting involved in the voting process. Like, it gives me so much hope for the future. Again, and it's not all students, it's obviously a small group that are the super uber motivated, but that was us about the day before, or it was a Saturday before, no, it was the day before, it was the Sunday before early voting started. And we just had some students, we met at the Starbucks in downtown Naperville, and we just spent 2 hours walking around. We made a little flyer that just said, vote early tomorrow. nothing partisan, nothing about specific places, but just how to register to vote. If you're not registered, some of the voting locations, and the kids had a great time. Just kind of walking around talking to people, and they were really just kind of pleased. And I was really kind of pleased with the turnout. It was actually a little snowy that day. And the kids really just had a great time. And actually none of them were at that point eligible to vote, which is kind of nice. So it's like, how can they actually still kind of get involved and really taking on? And the reason why it came out is because at that candidate forum, they were talking to the newly elected alderman at large. I think it's Keith Anderson. Am I right, Chris? Keith
Mhm.
Anderson.
Well,
And Keith Anderson was talking to my kids about the low voter turnout for
yeah.
local elections. And the kids were just shocked that, in some of these elections, only 400 or 500 people came out to vote. And then at our next meeting, they're like, well, what can we do? What could we actually do to try to potentially increase voter turnout? And they kind of came up with the idea. They made the little flyers and the signs. And it was really a great event. It got them really energized. And then there was a little uptick in local turnout. And so we kind of took a little bit of credit for that, but
Yeah.
just but it was really nice. It was really kind of fun to see them get together. So, and it, again, students from Aurora and Naperville.
Yeah, and I want to mention we partnered with the league back. I mean, how many years ago was it, Sue? You
Feel
remember?
like it was 2018 because it was definitely
Yeah,
before the pandemic, and I
yeah,
don't think it
I
was a
think that's right.
general election. So I think it was 2018.
Yeah, so we had partnered. So this idea has been, at least in our 204 schools, we in about I think that's right, 2018, we partnered with the league to get our regular government students to do some political science, and then just basically just getting people out to vote. And we researched the wards that had the lowest voter turnout, and then sent kids off door to door with a brief survey and asked them if they were going to vote, did they know there was an election, and things like that, to see if there would be an uptick in voter turnout in those wards. And there was a little bit. And so that was like a real success story, and it was fun. It was a chilly but nice day. We met at the Starbucks, and unfortunately, because of the way everything has become like a zero sum game politically, and you don't know what you're going to bring kids into when they go door to door. We've kind of backed off of that, but I think it's wonderful that Sue's students and her advisorship is able to just sort of adjust a little bit, not going door to door, but just being out and then getting the same action civics done. So I thought that was very cool. That other picture was I have a picture from us from Waubonsie at the Iowa State Capitol when we went for the caucuses. And then Sue, you want to? Well, you can. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
well,
want to talk
also,
about your thing on the
yeah, I guess,
the
well,
future
the
slide.
two other pictures, and I can talk a little bit more about Citizens of Mattia, but the top middle, we did a mock election at Mattia. We used to actually, a while ago, we were able to get like the actual voting booths and so forth from the county, and that was just a little bit more complicated. So we just kind of made our own. We just kind of ordered those little privacy screens on Amazon and just put Mustangs vote and, a flag. And we did a mock election for all students. And so it was really kind of cool to do that and just kind of have students get involved in the actual voting process. And then the student actually with the gavel at the podium, he was our elected Speaker of the House of Mattia Valley. And so we do a legislative simulation. So we first have a government-wide election where every class sends one Speaker of the House and one president candidate to do who won in their class. So first of all, there's a runoff within the class. There's 3 candidates for Speaker, 3 candidates for president. And then the winners of the class go down into the commons, and we have every lunch period, they campaign, they have little booths, talk about their issues, they're interviewed by different students, and then we actually have an election. And Riley was our elected Speaker of the House. And then our next unit in government, students write a bill that they're interested in with a partner, and then our speaker takes the bills that pass out of the committees in the classes and sets a docket of 8 bills. And the speaker gets to choose the bills that he or she wants, based on their policy proposals. And we do a whole legislative simulation. And then down in that far right, the elected president either signs or vetoes the bills. And this actually was a bill that did not get passed out of the House, but the president wrote a little note. And so we've kind of gotten involved in that. The president actually of Mattia writes a little note like why I would have signed this bill, why I didn't sign the bill. And we've kind of worked with that. And we actually, I don't know if Chris has the one pictures, but we have pens lined up too. We got pens that say, Mattia Valley Congress Day, and they get to like sign the bills with like the actual pens. And the kids really love it. I mean, they really, really, truly get into it. And it's been, we try to make it as much as active as we can. And I know Chris talked about, what he always tells his students. The thing I always tell them is democracy is hard work. Like it is hard work. We kind of push them a little bit to, come to a candidate fair, go watch a school board meeting, go to a community event, but it's hard work and that's democracy. And if we don't, then we would live in autocracy. We'd live in an authoritarian government. We wouldn't have all these choices. And so I always tell the kids and I joke, if I ever write a book, it's going to be democracy's hard work. We have to keep it alive. And I always say I have so much faith in them because our candidates that run, they have a debate, they make commercials, and they're always policy driven, very respectful. And it's just really great to see that students do it, I think, better than the real guys in DC sometimes. So it's really nice.
Yeah, and on that idea that Sue mentioned about democracy is hard. Even teaching democracy
It's hard.
is hard. And I'm just going to tell an anecdote that just I think our connection, but we held the first mock big school election at Waubonsie Valley in 2008. Which now Mattia Valley has taken this to a next level. But in 2008, Sue, I think you'll remember that we had a convention day in the atrium and then speeches in the auditorium. And that was a big year for young people to be enthused. That was Barack Obama's election year. But I also remember that was a hell of a lot of work for us as teachers. And I have to say, and this is where, especially as I'm retiring, and I'm not throwing shade on anyone, that you know what, if this is your thing, civics teacher, that's cool, but it might not be every one of your coworkers' thing. And I will just say this, a very good friend of ours who was our boss at that point, we got into a thing because we wanted our whole team to get all into it and give us help. And we were basically told, hey, slow your roll. Everyone doesn't have to do that. So for the civics educators and the students and all of us as citizens, it's hard and it doesn't always happen. And maybe it happens slower than we'd like, but one of the things in my last year of teaching here, I'm trying to be reflective of the little good things that happen along the way. In my classes, we don't do it like Mattia Valley, but I had my regular government classes have their class elections just today, and the kids really did get into it. So that was just a little nugget. On this slide here, we introduced ourselves, or Julie introduced ourselves, and just you can see these pictures throughout the years. Obviously Sue Fear and I have been at many different things together, looking for Congress people, as you see there, and stuff like that. Jan Schakowsky and Dick Durbin and oh my gosh, I'm
California, I know.
Yeah. Katie Porter.
Katie
Porter at the Iowa caucuses that we were able to meet. So why don't we go to the next slide and so maybe you can talk a little bit. These are just, again, more pictures of, I have to say, and I'll say it here, we also had partners that helped D204 and not just Mattia Valley and Waubonsie Valley, but Neuqua Valley as well. 2 times we had groups of 45 students go to Iowa City and take part in the Iowa caucuses, which were just amazing to take part in. You might remember that there was a counting problem in 2020. That might, there was not really a Democratic caucus in 2024 because at that time Biden, the incumbent, was non-contested. But the future of the Iowa caucus is certainly questionable, and we were, I guess, at maybe the last 2 that were old school way, and it was a great experience for our students. We got to meet very up close a presidential candidate. You see Andrew Yang there. You see Mrs. Fuhrer there in the background somewhere,
There.
but just a really a cool trip that kids that I've had over the years, they will still come back and talk about that. And then what at least we did at Waubonsie Valley was we had our kids who went on the caucus with us come back and teach the caucus to our other government students. So we got a big room and we had a candy caucus. And so they explained how a caucus works. And then they had, I don't know, Jolly Ranchers and Skittles and Twizzlers and whatever, and did that. And that was just a memorable day, probably for a lot of our students, that might have seemed goofy and fun, but when they're whatever, as they get older, and then they're like, okay, well, what's the Iowa caucus about? They know that because maybe they caucus for Skittles or something that day. So why don't we go to the next slide, and you can talk a little more about maybe the citizens of Mattia.
Yeah, so Citizens of Mattia, as I kind of earlier just explained, it was a student club, and students came to me. Actually, one of the girls, Ajama, was our founder, who actually went on the caucus trip, and I definitely do think that kind of like encouraged her. What can we do kind of on a more local level? And I also do think sometimes in our national politics gets tough. I try to turn and focus on local politics as much as possible. Even Chris and I can't remember when we did the Meet the Mayors. Remember we brought the
Yeah,
2 mayors
yeah,
in?
yeah.
It was kind of in an off election year. And so as much as we can to try to find, avenues for students to kind of activate change. And so we are a bipartisan club. Our president is actually very, very active in the Republican Party, the young Republicans and so forth. And then we have, a wide gamut of students and their kind of political beliefs, but we always are very open and honest how we discuss and how we talk. And so we were actually invited out that bottom picture. If you can see JB Pritzker is at the bottom there. Because of our activities with inviting so many candidates to our candidate fairs, actually the DuPage Democrats reached out to us and said, hey, we would like to give 10 tickets to your club, and we'd like to invite you to come to our gala. And they paid for our whole table. So we were able to meet Juliana Stratton, we were able to JB Pritzker, and hear a whole number of series of elected officials that night. And then we got invited in turn. The Republicans invited us to come to their big red banquet, which is in Schaumburg. Unfortunately, it's the night of prom at Mattia, but I'm sure we'll be able to get a group of kids to go. And to be honest, they don't necessarily at this point really care Democrat, Republican. They're just really excited to meet stakeholders. Jack Pye, who is actually, he's the chair of our Citizens of Mattia. He actually spoke at our school board meeting on Monday night on his own, just talking about, we wanted to do a fundraiser for Citizens of Mattia. We wanted to have a pancake breakfast before school, and our food service, it's against contract to actually sell food before school. And so he came in and spoke at the board meeting because he said, well, and he kind of said, why does the PTSA, why can they sell crumble cookie? Why can't we do pancakes? And he, he's a public comment, and that's exactly what he did. And I'm just so proud of them every single day for kind of taking something that might seem like a small issue, and we talk about it in our club, and what kind of action potentially, could we take? And so that's really just some of the things. And then with the candidate fair there, when you see Bill Foster, when we try to work on the candidate fair, we started like in August, July, reaching out to candidates, getting the campaign managers. I use the league for some resources too. Hey, we can't get a hold of this person. Do you have a better number? The kids, we pick up phones and call, after school, and even having them call people is unique for students today. They do so much kind of on their phone, and they watched me call, the DuPage County Democrats and say, this is what we're trying to do. Can you get me in contact with people? And we got the numbers right away. And they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, I picked up the phone. But, just kind of really doing some of those action civics things. And then down here, that's the picture of our president from last semester. Signing the bills. And we got the kind of those simple pens. So, and I was kind of really, big on getting the pens, and then the bill authors get to keep a pen. And it's just kind of those little things that really just kind of make it stick. And I would say being successful is getting the emails like Chris talked about, getting those phone calls. One of my students was actually working for the Biden administration, and she actually invited me to come to the White House for a tour. And then
Yeah.
it didn't work out, and then now I missed my chance. But
Yeah.
it's just some of those things are just pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think, probably, and maybe Chris can kind of talk about this a little
Yeah.
bit, but one of the things that we have done in our government classes as part of the requirements is to have a civic engagement project that students actually have to do some in and out of class experiences. And sometimes it's like a little bit of a groan when you first roll it out. But by the end of the project, the students are like, I never would have done that if it wasn't for the civic engagement project. So I really do think we are scoring a big win with getting kids involved in civics.
Yeah, and both Waubonsie and Matia Valley do this basic project, and even there's been some debate among teachers on, like, are you telling them what they have to do? Well, what we do is we give them a menu of choices, and then they make their own choices. Whereas sometimes a teaching mind might say, well, let the kids make their own choices. Well, I think Sue and I both feel like we need to give them a foundation of, here are options, because otherwise they're not going to look. I mean, they're 17 years old, or they're not going to actively look. But if you put out there, here are these things, and you have 40 points of my actions to do, maybe and hopefully you can find something that works for you, or it gets you to think about something that maybe your parents are involved in, or your sports team is involved in, and then you can use that. And it's been a successful thing. There's a picture of me and a former student of mine whose mother is on our school board right now, but when she was working as an election judge at Steck School when I came over to vote. The other picture up there was, we did formally have what was called Aurora Soapbox. That was from another one of our civic partners, the Mikvah Challenge. And all the schools in Aurora had a Aurora soapbox competition, which was pretty cool. We can move to the next one, maybe. We'll take you through just a couple of these here. This is a picture of from the last time we did the League of Women Voters, and we took out and we went door to door and got information. So we did some political science there, and then we studied the turnout of voters and stuff like that. And then you see up at the top, again, shout out to the league for doing their birthday boxes. It says birthday email. Our students say that they are interested in getting a birthday box. The league delivers the birthday boxes, and it is really just heartening to see. when the kids, they get 2 points for their project. So not a lot, 2 points out of, I don't know, 80 for mine, Sue. I don't know about yours. But that's not the point, but the point is during class when they get delivered, they open them up and they have a handwritten card from League of Women Volunteers. It's got some candy, it's got voter information, most likely, and I think that resonates.
Handwritten letter, I think, is really kind of the
No, yeah, yeah,
highlight
yeah,
because they don't get a lot of handwritten letters. We're
yeah,
so digital and so email, and the fact that someone takes the time to write them a letter,
yeah.
they really do appreciate it. So it's really been a great thing.
I've chuckled when kids say, "Mr. Wallach, can you read this for me? I can't read cursive." Okay, so but that happens. This is just again we have those approved political activities, and I just like this picture because this is one of the original Waubonsie Valley candidate forums, and it just seems so old looking at it. Although I recognize some of those youth in government faces that are there compared to the newer photos over at Metea Valley, which has really taken the baton and ran faster with it. So we can move to the next one. I am just going to show this because this is my, Mrs. Fuhrer said, she missed the chance to go to the White House, but I got a shout out because of kids that were going and going out to this was a Lauren Underwood rally. I
Okay.
don't know if we can
I
play
hope
that.
you can hear.
Can we hear that? Oh no.
Yeah, we don't have any audio for that one.
Oh, well, Joe Biden was giving me a shout out after my students were
Do you hear the
missing
audio or
class,
not?
you know,
Yeah.
but oh well, trust me, it's there. So I got to make sure that I never delete that thing. But he tells me to give those students a break that they were missing school to go to a Lauren Underwood rally. But again, you get kids hooked there. So we can move then to the next one.
Okay.
Again, thanks to partners like the League of Women Voters, we've had, at least in my 30 years, thousands of students register to vote. I think about 200, maybe this year, maybe not 200. That's a little high, but so and right now, I think when we look at the numbers again, Mrs. Fuhrer and those Metea Valley Mustangs, they're always leading the pack. Waubonsie's trailing them, but they get it done over there. And again, the partnership, I can't say enough. To be able to try to get your kids into action civics, it's hard for a high school to do it alone without legit civic partners like the League of Women Voters.
And I think too, I know kids can register online and some of them do it at the DMV, but even the fact that the students walking by in the hallway see, oh, register to vote. They'll stop by and ask some questions. They get to take the oath. So I mean, as long as possible, I would love to keep with that partnership of in-person voter registration because I think it just
Yeah.
really means a lot and it makes it seem a little bit more ceremonial than just, filling out a form online. So it's really been great.
Yeah. And so like we were saying, we've had different civic partners that have helped us along the way. The Mikvah Challenge, one of Sue and I's colleagues we all started teaching at Waubonsie Valley together. Andy Kanine's a great friend and such a good resource for Mikvah. I know there's a Mikvah national conference, and he sent out just hey, we've got some spots. And two of my youth and government kids, like sophomores, are really into it. They applied and they got picked. So they're going to
Nice.
Washington on this conference, and they're very excited about it. And they were trying to ask me, well, what do I do to get picked? I'm like, I don't really. I said, I know my guys, said he's got some spots. I don't know, but other than that, they did it. They had to write their essay and whatever, and then they got picked. You know, the city of Aurora. I don't know if this will continue. I hope it certainly does during the new mayoral administration. But the youth summit that started during the Irvin administration, I attended it this spring, where students from all of the Aurora high schools, including Oswego, any ones that students that lived in Aurora, even though students that I took were from Naperville as well. That was a really a nice event, where kids were talking about what policy issues the city of Aurora should try to seedbed, and they got their ideas. Now, whether or not but they can actually know that if they were there and then they were heard, now is there any follow through? And if not, hold their government officials accountable. And so, again, without the partnership, our action civics programs couldn't be as successful as they are. Yet, I will say, Matea Valley and Waubonsie Valley, I will put our civic education mindset up against anyone. And that being said, that does not mean that Sue and I don't have students that are sitting in our regular government class that or opt out of our regular government class to take it online because maybe they are not that engaged. Maybe they are turned off by our situation of politics. But I think, and Sue, you can get a closing on this, but I think, at least I believe, that as much action civics as we can promote, we are more likely to get civic engagement for our students.
I
If
agree.
we don't do that, then we are really fighting an uphill battle, especially in a time where most of the kids don't like the political dialogue that we're all seeing. So
Yeah, and I would say too, on just touching on political dialogue, I just feel like 10 years ago, you could almost get students to share a little bit more,
yeah,
about
oh right, right.
about their personal beliefs. I think there is just a little fear of potentially being, am I going to say the wrong thing? Is someone going to disagree with me? Because they're so used to communicating online. And even something so simple at the candidate fair, they walk around with a little paper sheet and they got to fill out some answers and interview and ask some questions. We have a little bingo card. So also just kind of working on some of those social skills of having kind of those discussions in class, I think is really, really important, because so much of what they see online is so partisan, and is so divisive. One of the options for our civic engagement project is to find an inflammatory, post on X or on Facebook or on Instagram, Snapchat, and rewrite it in a respectful way, still kind of maintaining like the meaning of what potentially maybe someone's upset about. So that's also just kind of a big challenge, is like working in this new era, of where everything is dominant on social media. News changes so fast. And sometimes that gets to be difficult. So, but it's fun. It's really rewarding, and it gives me, like, every year I have so much hope for the future, for the students that are in our classes. I really do. Yet again, there's gonna be some that are not engaged and some that, they took the class and they're done. But I think more often than not, students are like, I really didn't know anything. I never would have gone to this meeting. I never would have been a juror for the youth and government mock trial. We even have them be juror duties. There's a lot of different things that students can do in our classes. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and just again, as best as possible, you hope um, that the students get teachers that are authentically interested, because, and I don't know if I can. Well, Sue, I don't know. Well, I'm not even going to go there. I'm just
Okay.
just going to say, I'm going to say that my friend Sue and I are probably about as engaged of any civics teachers that I know, except for maybe our friend Andy. But and so everyone's not like that. So they may have and so at least for me, as I have my last quarter of teaching, I worry about that a little bit because I'm like, who's going to do that at my school? And if no one's doing that at my school, will anyone care? And so and I think we've got to care. So, and I think that's why, at least if I can speak again to the partner, like Sue said, the partnership and continuing partnership with the league is really important because if our partners continue to tell our schools, hey, we want to work with you, then it makes it a little, at least it opens up the door for the school to be able to not be able to say no. And then when the school doesn't say no, then it opens the door for the students, and more times than not, the students will respond. So
I
yeah,
don't know if this was time, if there's any questions, if anyone
yeah,
has any questions, if
yeah,
there's anything in the chat.
Yeah, thank you both. I mean, you're both incredible teachers and role models for these kids. I'm so I have so much respect for you guys. Thank you for all you're doing. From the chat, we have one comment. Every bit helps. Thanks to you guys and your students. There is so much confusion about where to vote that doesn't help turnout. So that's when you guys were taking the kids out and asking people if they were registered to vote and encouraging them to vote. Pat from Joliet asks, do you encourage the kids who are old enough to volunteer to be election judges? In one of our
Yes.
precincts,
yeah,
the judges really love the younger person, a high school student who comes to be a judge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I will
yeah,
say we've actually had them say, Mattia, you send too many kids. Like they give us a
yeah,
cap
yeah,
and we can only send 25 to 30 kids because they want
yeah,
to leave room for other people. So
yeah,
we do a great job. Yeah. And I
yeah.
know Waubonsie does too.
We do too, not as many as you, but and I was on, I have to say I'm old. I was on the first teacher committee in DuPage County when they started the what was then called the first judge program. So we've been at that for a long time. Like in November, we had 12 student election judges, and then in the spring, and then of course that's also on our civic engagement project. And then they did not take any new
People.
judges this spring. So and some kids were bummed out about that, but I and I just have to, I'm just going to tell this anecdote. It was just like, I was on the committee to get student election judges, right? And so this is back 2008 again. But I had a student who was very excited working as a student election judge, but she's also excited to vote for her first time. Well, she was assigned to a polling place that was not her polling place. So she asked me, well, what can I do, Mr. Wolak? I really want to vote. She said, I really want to vote for Barack Obama. And I'm like, well, you can go early vote. And she went over to the Yola Center to early vote. And the adult election judge told her, well, wait a minute, you can't vote. You're not 18 yet. Her birthday was November 4th, election day. And
Oh
so
my gosh.
and she went like, I don't know, 2 weeks early or whatever. And so she came back the next day. She was crying. And she's like, so I wound up on the phone with the election commission, just like, what are you doing? Whatever. Of course you can vote. And the guy literally said, wait, so her birthday, she turns 18 on election day? And I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, well, I've never heard of that before. And I'm like, seriously? It's just a funny anecdotal story after 30 years you have, but it is. So student election judges, but then and a student doesn't know. So when a student goes and the guy says, well, hey, you can't vote, they put their head down and they're like, wait, but it becomes a learning experience when they come back and say, well, yeah, of course I can vote.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because you always want that first experience to be really positive,
I
right? I mean,
know.
there's so much research that if you vote your first election and you
Yeah,
make it
yeah,
part of, you make it a
yeah,
habit, you're gonna be a lifelong voter. So that's hopefully one of the things that we really try. Yeah, I love the new rule that you can vote at any
yeah.
place in DuPage County. It's
In DuPage
amazing.
County, yeah,
It's
yeah,
amazing. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that is great. Pat just posted that it's great to hear about the student judges. She's been an election judge for nearly 30 years, and in Will County, we're always looking for the kids to fill in. So you
Okay.
could
Well,
send
we
some
can
for
probably put you in touch with Neuqua Valley because I know there are a decent number of kids,
In Will
from Will
County, yeah,
County
yeah,
and
yeah,
try to get them there. But
yep, yep. Students, also tell the students that that's something that they can put on their college resume, and sometimes the colleges like that.
yeah. Okay, Anne asks, if the SAVE Act passes, how do you think this will affect student registration and voting?
Well,
it's go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
yeah. Well, the one thing already, when you consider just the 37 plus states that have whatever mandatory ID laws. One of the things we talk about often is that when our students go to college in a different state, then make sure that they know the ID rule. And then that becomes we actually do a deliberation on voter IDs and stuff like that. But certainly when you consider I mean, clearly, I would say that the SAVE Act as drafted is blatantly unconstitutional. But with the Supreme Court, I don't, who knows? Um, um, but how will that affect? It certainly can't help.
No, it was kind of sad when a girl raised her hand and she asked me, she's like, my mom's really concerned that she's not gonna be able to vote because she's divorced,
Hmm.
and asking me those types of questions. And they're like, what can we do? What can we do? And
Yeah,
again, you have to try to be objective in the classroom. There are some times where, we try not to say our personal opinions, but what are the positives, what are the negatives? And that's part of the project is contact your lawmaker.
right,
So take a look at that act and look up the bill number and where is it? Is it in the House? Is it in the Senate? Who would you contact to give them your opinion, whether to vote yes on this act or no on this act? And it was funny, one of the girls, and this was a couple of years ago, but she's like, we can just like email our senator. I'm like, yeah, of course you can. You can, and they didn't realize that, even if they can't vote, even if they're not old enough, that they can actually make that contact.
right.
And again, I know we're jumping around from stories, but when the net neutrality bill was really big, Bill Foster got so many letters from Mattia Valley about net neutrality that he actually came. He's like, can I come to your school and respond to all these kids? I'm like, sure. So we actually had kind of like a little pop-up assembly of all the kids that were interested in the net neutrality bill. And that was, again, something they'll probably never forget, that actually our member of Congress actually came to our school to respond. And
And,
that's
and
one of
I'm
the
going to
things.
say, we also
Yeah.
we had Lauren Underwood
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
same deal. She
Yeah.
came as well. So to Waubonsie. So
And
yeah,
again, I think kids, like, giving them that opportunity and explaining, like, it is an assignment, right?
yeah,
Reach
yeah,
out on something that you're interested in, but they might have never known that before. And just telling them that in a lecture is so different than actually having them take that action. And some kids, not all, but they actually get, a handwritten letter back, or it's typed, obviously, probably by an intern, but the fact that they get some type of letter, back or an email back, it means a lot. It means that their voice, actually matters. So
So and then also too, like Sue does often. I just on that, I'm writing or contacting our legislators. This last fall, and it was perfect for me in my retirement year when the last bill that Congress passed was to get rid of the Social Security Windfall Provision Act, which I started teaching when I was 30, paying into Social Security. That money would have been that of my money would have been forfeited until the Congress passed the last bill of the last session. Well, while my kids were writing on particular pieces of legislation, I said, well, guess what, guys? I'm doing the same thing because this bill has a chance to pass. And I wrote it. They saw my letter. They saw my contacts, and that bill then got signed in. I literally got on my soapbox and jumped for joy for that big victory. And they're like, "So you think your contact really matter?" I'm like, "Well, me and millions of others that did, but yes, it did work."
All right. Susan said the Roselle Bloomingdale League of Women Voters chapter has just started to work with our local high school, faculty, and a couple of students to establish a youth league. Any more suggestions in addition to some of the ideas you've shared about getting students engaged?
Yeah, I think probably letting those students kind of find their own voice and kind of figure out, what are some of the issues that are really important to them. I know our club specifically is very, very clear about being bipartisan. Like we really, really want to make sure that we are bipartisan and that we are listening to all voices. We have had some controversial discussions, in the past. We also kind of host like very similar to this type of a forum. We had right when October 7th happened, it was about 3 weeks later that we had a discussion on what was happening in Palestine, in Israel, and how do we actually, make some of those connections. And that's actually one of the ways that we hooked more kids even into our club. So I think probably kind of identifying what is kind of a big issue at their school and what is potentially something that they would like to work on and they would like to have their voice being heard on. But I also really do think that, making connections with members of Congress, local candidates. Janet Yang Rohr has been to Matia several times. Just making those personal connections with members of local government, state government. We've never had anyone national level, obviously, kind of at our school. But I think that's kind of some of the bigger things to try to get them involved with. Like what are they really passionate about, and run with it.
Yeah, and while we don't have a citizens of Matia, we do have a group out of our English department, an English teacher, and one of my youth and government girls founded a group called Amplify, and they meet every month about some civic issue, and then it's very grassroots and stuff like that. But sometimes it builds into more than that, and even just our our student push to get a seat on our school board.
Oh yeah, we did that. Yeah.
So that was very student driven. Student citizens at Matia and Waubonsie Valley, and then also Nequa Valley. They basically reached out to us. Sue and I were kind of like faculty, I don't want to say faculty advisors, but we kind of like listened in on what their plan was. The students really started with they wanted to bring change for the start time of our school, of our high school day, 7:25. And I think that was kind of the impetus of that. But then it grew into like, well, how can they just have a voice in policy? And eventually the school board was receptive, although they did not want to put in today's ways and times, they did not want to put like a student right on the school board, but they did say, here, you're going to be kind of on an advisory board.
Mhm.
So they created that, but it was basically from the student idea. The students came to Sue at Matia, to me at Waubonsie, and then they just kind of ran with it. So and maybe they didn't see the success that they wanted to have, but it's slow in happening, and it is more than it was before.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, one last question. The League of Women Voters in Naperville just had a consensus meeting for a report about ranked choice voting. Do you talk with your students about alternatives to pluralistic voting? And what do they think about it?
Well, I'm going to say that I think some of my kids who are very engaged talk about it more than I do because they're kind of into it. I'm like kind of like, all right, well, I don't know how much traction. I'm like, okay, I'm not taking a whole lot of time on this, but this is something that some of those kids really want to talk about because they think it's just a more fair way to vote.
And we had someone at our candidate fair from the
Yeah,
ranked choice voting
yeah, yeah,
came and actually spoke to students and passed things out and got at least kind of the word out talking about it. So they actually asked to do ranked choice voting for our youth and government elections.
yeah,
Um, and I wasn't, to be honest, I was a little nervous about setting it up. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, and how it
yeah,
actually would work
yeah,
and so forth. But they're definitely interested. And then I think just more than anything, just kind of thinking about like, why does the incumbent always win? Why are there only two parties? I know that's a really, really strong discussion in the school classroom. Like, why is it only the Democrats and the Republicans? What about the Green Party? What about this party?
yeah, yeah,
And so that they're more, and I love showing them. And if you've ever looked, just the number of parties we have in the United States, just go to the Wikipedia page. It's actually kind of a fun thing to take a look at. There's the, high rent party in New York City and all these different things. And they're interested to just explore because otherwise they think it's just the Democrats and the Republicans. And there is a lot more out there for them. So.
yeah.
Great. Does anybody else have any other questions? I think that's everything. Thank you both so much, Chris Wolak and Sue Fuhrer, for coming tonight and for sharing your experiences with us. I think it was really heartening to hear how involved the kids are and frankly, how involved you are in teaching civics to our students. I think you guys are wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks
Yeah, thanks for
everyone for
having us.
coming. Yeah, yeah. Keep the
yeah, thank
partnership going.
you.
Yeah, thanks for everything you do
Absolutely.
for us.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. All right, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. Next month, we're going to have Dr. William Muck from North Central College talk about the health of our democracy. It should be a really interesting conversation. I hope to see you all then. And thank you again to Chris and Sue.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night, everybody.